Hello, everybody, and welcome into this week's 30 Minutes program. This is a very timely program, and I'm glad you're listening today because we have a lot to cover in a short period of time. My guest today is Dr. Lionel Crews. He is the Associate Professor of Physics at the University of Tennessee at Martin. He's been there for some 25 years almost, and he's going to tell us everything we think we need to know about the eclipse that's taking place this Monday. Dr. Crews, first off, I am thrilled to have you on the radio today because there's so many questions that people are asking, and I don't know what the answers are, and it seems like you have to go somewhere to find out, where is it that I need to be if I want to see the eclipse? So thanks for coming in today, and tell me how big a deal this is.
This is a huge deal. I can say that probably the first question people will ask after they see an eclipse is, when is the next one? It is a life-changing experience, and most people don't realize just how amazing totality is. If you see a total eclipse, so many things happen that even if you know they're going to happen, it's still just mentally shocking and just inspiring and amazing.
Now, how long is this happening? Has this been going on as long as Earth was created?
Yeah, yes, pretty much. The moon's orbit, although it's not perfectly lined up with the Earth's orbit around the sun, it's pretty close. So we get eclipses about every year or two.
Mm-hmm. And how come we don't get to see them very often?
Because the moon is so much smaller than the Earth, its shadow on the Earth is tiny. And so only certain locations will be in the shadow to see the eclipse.
Okay, now I remember going to 7th grade science, and I had to name the planets and maybe some of the stars, even the North Star. But a lot of people perhaps don't have any idea how far away the moon is, how far away the sun is. Let's dive in just a little bit because those are the two things that are making this happen.
Right. How much numbers you want me to get into, but the moon is about 400,000 kilometers away from us. So that's roughly, let's see, it's about 80 or 90 times farther away than the Earth is wide. Mm-hmm. So one example is if you were to take a volleyball and a softball separated by, I don't know, a couple dozen feet, that'd be a pretty good model for the Earth and the moon. Now the sun is 150 million kilometers away, much farther away. But in sort of an odd coincidence, the size of the sun in the sky and the size of the moon in the sky are about the same. Mm-hmm. So what that means is if the moon were much bigger, we'd get eclipses all the time. They would last for hours, and it wouldn't be quite as special an event. If the moon were much smaller, we would never have eclipses. But we just are at that perfect, almost perfect size to where eclipses are very rare, they're very brief, and so they're worth trying to see.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask some broad questions here, but why don't we have them more often? What is it?
The moon's orbit is tilted a little bit with respect to the Earth's orbit. So what that means is it's most of the time it's not lined up. So the Earth, moon, and the sun are not in a straight line. It's only when the orbits of the Earth and the sun just happen to be lined up perfectly that you can get an eclipse.
You have had the opportunity to work with some very good equipment. Also, I think we probably ought to jump in just a moment here about the STEM building, the Latimer building, as some people would refer to it, the Latimer Smith building. This gives you really, I guess, kind of like Christmas, is it not?
Absolutely. It's amazing, yes.
So tell me what you would see if you were at your desk or at your work area and you're got your telescope going.
Well, one of the interesting things is, unless you're trying to do some research, there's really not a reason to use a telescope because the sun and the moon are fairly, big in the sky, and because the timing is so precise, it starts and it ends in just a few minutes. Trying to set up a telescope is actually kind of difficult, especially since a telescope, their whole purpose is focusing light so that you can make things brighter. If you try to look at the sun and you happen to not time it properly, you could actually cause damage to your telescope. Mm-hmm. So there are people that use telescopes to view the eclipse. In fact, there's a big program sponsored by NASA where it's actually almost crowdsourcing looking at the eclipse. So, they give telescopes and things out to people. But it's, most of the time, the best thing to do is just go out and look at it.
Mm-hmm. Now, this affects a lot of things and a lot of people different ways. Some people may think it is the coming. Other people think that it might, cause me to die when this happens if I'm in there. But let's just deep dive into this.
Eclipses, again, they're such an amazing thing. And if you see one, you know what I'm talking about. There's a good reason why eclipses have been such an important thing throughout history to even prehistoric people. We have evidence in, things that people carved or, stones that they set up on the ground. People have thought eclipses were an amazing thing for thousands of years now. It's actually been an important cultural phenomenon going all the way back to, again, prehistoric societies. So I don't know, I just wish I could emphasize, if you have the ability to go see totality, you should try.
Moving into this big arena, which only lasts for 4 minutes or so, what happens? What really happens?
And see, this is the amazing part. When I saw the eclipse in 2017, I knew what was going to happen. As a scientist, I knew all the little details, that the temperature was going to drop like 10 degrees. You were going to be able to...
Wait a minute, the temp's going to to go down?
Yes, it will go down, yeah. The sun is our source of light and heat, so yeah, it goes down. And you'll see this massive shadow coming at you from the horizon. And animals will change their behavior. Insects, birds, all sorts of animals, animals that have a nocturnal behavior, that will kick in for a short period of time.
Are you telling me dogs may be howling?
It's possible. I mean, if you have a dog that likes to howl at night, that could very well happen. Absolutely.
And you mentioned the birds. Tell me about those.
Right. Birds, most birds, they won't fly at night. They will have different songs that they'll sing. And so you'll hear and see some of that happening as well.
I'm talking to Dr. Lionel Crews. We're talking about the eclipse. It's happening in our area Monday. What time?
About 1 p.m., a little after 1 p.m.
Mm-hmm. And some of the things that are going on. Well, let me talk to you about trying to get to the right spot to watch this. You said you drove to Draffinville and were 99.5 or whatever that percentage was. Is there a place that you can best go? Is it Sikeston, Missouri, or is it going to be Paducah, Cape, in that area, or Evansville?
Yeah, NASA actually has a really good website which has a map of exactly where it's going to be and when. Sikeston, Missouri is a great spot. Carbondale, Illinois would be a great spot. Now, close to us, Paducah and Evansville would be good spots. Now, because they're kind of on the edge of the path of totality, the eclipse isn't going to be the full 4 minutes. It'll be less than that. But, even 2 minutes is still amazing. So I would recommend, if you do have the ability to travel on that day at that time, Paducah would be a great spot.
Mm-hmm. As we record this program here for Saturday and Sunday, I don't have a handle on the weather, but I've got to ask, so what happens if we got a cloudy day?
We maybe just be out of luck. I mean, again, because it's going to get darker, you'll still be able to perceive something, but you won't be able to see it. And seeing it is, a little bit more than half the amazing part of it. And one of the things that you can see when the eclipse happens, normally you can't see the atmosphere of the sun because the surface of the sun is so much brighter. But during an eclipse, you can see it. It's called the corona, and it is absolutely amazing. It's otherworldly. I mean, literally, just this crazy shaped sort of, filamentary, fuzzy sort of source of light, like an aura around the sun. It's amazing. So you wouldn't see that if it's cloudy. Now, one thing I can say is if it's cloudy where I am and there's a non-cloudy spot nearby, that's where I'm going. I will try my hardest to go to a non-cloudy spot.
I'm interested, and I guess you really need to pay close attention to the weather. When you're getting up Monday morning, and you're getting ready to head out because you're going to go to a parking lot somewhere, or maybe a friend's got a place, and you're telling me that you are ready to go. So you just need to get a lawn chair, sit down and start looking up, or lay down on the ground and look up. I mean, what do you do? What do people do?
Whatever's comfortable. A chair, like a folding chair, outdoor chair would be great. A lawn chair. I just stood and watched it. And, again, while it's happening, it's so amazing, you'll forget where you are and what you're doing. It becomes a sort of all-encompassing, amazing thing that's just happening to you. So, but yeah, a chair would be perfect.
Yeah. There are airplanes that will be flying through this. Is that right? I mean, it's got to be. I mean, because we got lots of planes in the in the sky.
Absolutely. In fact, I think they're trying. I heard this. I haven't heard more about it in a while, but I think they're going to try to have a plane flight that will try to stay with the eclipse a little bit, sort of follow the path of the eclipse and try to, see it for a longer period of time. Of course, the one thing that I always think about, if you're in a plane, you see one direction, right? So I would hope that whatever direction the plane is flying, everybody's seated on the side of the plane where they can see it. So I don't know what the exact plans are for that, but I've heard that somebody's trying to get that set up.
Well, that'll be interesting. I mean, and all the people on the other side of the plane, they're probably, can I see? I can see.
And that's the thing is sometimes you'll take plane flights to, like Washington or something like that. And so you want to see all the mountains, Mount Rainier and all that. But if you're on the wrong side of the plane, you don't see anything at all. I mean, it's I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how they're setting this up, but it sounds interesting.
In this time that we're there, and does it affect wind in any means?
It can, because of the temperature difference. Anytime you have a temperature difference, that can cause wind and other, patterns with heat to happen. So I don't recall feeling a wind when it came by last time, but again, it's I don't actually remember a lot other than just how amazing it was.
You're kind of giddy about this. I mean,
absolutely. Again, I had never seen one. I'm an astronomer. You'd think that maybe I would have seen one, but I had not seen one before the 2017. And again, I knew what was going to happen. I had this checklist in my mind, look for this. This is going to be awesome. And then when it happened, again, it's just an experience that is just so amazing.
Okay, I'm very interested also to know, we're here in Martin, as many people know, that our studios are here. So can you, we can stand here, we can go outside, and it's not going to be as dark, but it will be a little bit darker, right?
Yes, sir. We're at about, I think, 99.5% totality here in Martin, roughly. So it'll get considerably darker.
So we could actually stand in our backyards or front yards or wherever, go to the ballpark or someplace and watch it, but it's not going to be the totality that you're talking about. But isn't that just as almost kind of good the same way?
Unfortunately not. Totality has so much more to it than even 99.9%. It'll still be cool. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's still going to be something that, because it doesn't happen every day, it'll be interesting and kind of neat to experience that big chunk of the sun being eaten away by the moon. But totality, that's really where you got to be. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I don't want anybody to, just take off of work and get fired or anything like that just so they can go see the eclipse. But if you have a way to go to totality, you should do it.
And this is, of course, some people already know this, but there are no hotel rooms anywhere around.
I would be surprised if there's any campsites or hotels or anything like that along the path of totality. Obviously I haven't looked because I got my own spot. I've got a colleague of mine who lives near Sikeston, Missouri. So I'm going to be there.
You're going to leave early, aren't you?
I'm going to leave early that morning. Yes. Just in case there's traffic.
Yeah, I would say so. Interstate 24, Purchase Parkway, I-24 going north, and there's just a lot of questions that I continue to think about, and here's one of them. So if we're sitting here, let's just say we're at the university, okay, and we got a clean view, not of necessarily the sky, but we're up. Let's just say we were on top of the Graham Stadium, football stadium. Okay, that's a pretty good place to be. Can you watch it from a long way and watch it get dark as it slowly comes across and, video it? I got another question after this here. We're going to deal with the Facebook. Go ahead.
No, yeah, absolutely. Again, if you're not in the path of totality, or even if you're in the path of totality and you're planning on looking at the sun when it's not total, you should get some of those glasses.
Well, what about your Facebook page? Do you need to put something over the camera's eye?
That would be recommended. When you're out of totality, if you tried to film with like a phone camera or something like that, if you're out of totality, it'll wash out your camera pointing at the sun. So yeah, some sort of a solar filter to help cut down the light. That's basically what a solar filter does, is it just removes 99.5% of the light we're getting from the sun to make it where it's not just completely washed out.
Yeah. I know we talked about clouds a moment ago. Anything that deals with rain? I mean, obviously there may be some moisture in the sky.
If it's cloudy or rainy, overcast, again, you'll still be able to perceive something is happening, but just basically that it's getting darker is what you'll perceive.
So let me go back to the cameras for a moment, since you're in the camera business with the telescopes and so forth. Can you take a picture of a partial totality?
Sure.
And it not hurt your camera or hurt your eyes?
If you have a solar filter, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, there is this new kind of telescope that I don't know if we have time to talk about today, but it's called the C-Star 50. It's a completely automated, cell phone controlled telescope that has kind of taken the amateur astronomy community by storm, and it comes with a solar filter. In fact, I think the reason why they did that is knowing that the eclipse was coming up.
Since you are an astronomer, I think the question would be, if you were on the moon, let's just say we have people on the moon today, and they're on the what you would call the light side, but the sun's on the back side. So would you be able to see all of the darkness come down because it's behind you? You know where I'm going with this?
Absolutely.
All right, take me to that.
So yeah, if you were it would actually be the dark side of the moon. That would be on the side of the moon not facing the sun. And you were to look down on the earth, you would literally see a little spot on the earth that moves. The shadow, you would see it moving across the face of the earth.
And it would be dark, and it would be slowly moving.
Exactly.
We talked about this about airplanes and going through that. And it's got to be a weird feeling. I don't know how else to describe it, but it just seems like it's going to be something really, really interesting.
It is. I, of course, haven't seen it on a plane. So, again, I would be worried about how, those windows in the planes tend to be kind of small. So actually being able to see it, because since it's going to be around 1 p.m. here, if you were to, fly through in this general area, that's 1 p.m. daylight savings time. So that's about noon normal time. The sun's going to be almost directly overhead when the eclipse happens. So I don't know. I'm not sure how how well that would work to see it.
So 1 o'clock, we're talking about it almost coming straight down as opposed to out a little bit.
Yes,
as like when we have a sunset, we all know that it's going to be in the west, and we're going to look up. But to be able to look up and and a serious question, will you have any trouble finding the sun without?
Not at all. Not at all. It will be. Even during totality, it is an amazing, obvious sight. It's one of those things you can't miss.
What is it that scientists get out of all of this? What's your take on that?
Well, one of the main things that we can get is, it used to be before we had satellites that the only way we could look at the atmosphere of the sun was during an eclipse. So even now, we only have a couple of satellites that are looking at the sun. Even now, it's still a way to look at and measure that corona, the atmosphere of the sun, which is a fascinating thing. It's got some properties that, even to today, we can't fully explain exactly its structure. And it's very high temperature, has some weird sort of elemental effects that are occurring inside there. So it's still something that's worth studying for sure.
Does this have any bearing on life on Earth? And I'm going to give you a couple of thoughts here. They say sometimes when there's a full moon, people in the nursing homes are a little bit more active, if you will. Or for that fact, maybe, people are just a little bit scared of what's going on. They don't know what to. And there are people that will have no idea what is taking place because they don't pay attention.
Right. Oh, absolutely. A full moon, because it happens so often, it might have a little bit of an effect just because you can see better. During a full moon, you can see better at night. But the eclipse, there's a reason why this is not a universally true thing, but you hear about, these stories about the Mayans and the Aztecs having big ceremonies when the eclipse is going to happen. It is an astonishing thing. It's something that when it's happening, everything is different about your life at that point. And so I can imagine some people being scared if they don't know what's going to happen or don't know that it's going to happen. I could see that definitely happening more than a full moon anyway.
Yeah. If you've just joined us, Dr. Lionel Crews is our guest. He's with the University of Tennessee at Martin. We're talking about what's happening here this Monday afternoon at approximately 1 p.m. Central, and we're talking about the eclipse. What's the definition of an eclipse? Is it simply when the moon gets, dumb it down?
No, eclipse is basically when one object in the sky, the heavens, the celestial sphere, goes in front of the other. So we have all kinds of eclipses that occur. In fact, there's a class of stars called eclipsing binary stars. So you have two stars that are orbiting each other, and if their orbit just happens to line up perfectly, you'll see the light go down from them. There'll be a little mini eclipse that will occur. That's one of the ways we've actually been able to find planets around other stars, because sometimes the planet will go in front of the other star and we'll see that little dip in the total amount of light that comes out. So yeah, eclipses happen all the time. They have a bunch of different names. Like when Mercury goes in front of the sun, because it's so much smaller, it just cuts out a little circle of the sun. We actually call that a transit. So if something is a lot smaller and doesn't do like, mostly eclipse the object, we just call it a transit. One of the official terms, if you want a fancy scientific term, the official term is actually occultation. Occultation is the effect of one object going in front of the other. So sometimes when the moon can go in front of Jupiter and eclipse Jupiter, we call that a Jupiter occultation, that sort of thing.
All right, so we have Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and we used to have Pluto, but you guys kicked him right out of the solar system. I'm not happy about that. I had to learn Pluto. So, by the way, whatever happened to Pluto? Well,
Pluto is still a planet. It's just we now realize that the properties of Pluto, the kind of orbit that it has, it's sort of mechanical, physical properties in our solar system are a little different than most planets. So we put an adjective in front of it, dwarf. So it's still a planet, it's just a dwarf planet.
What does that mean?
So think of like the asteroid belt. Most people have heard of the asteroid belt. That's a bunch of objects. So there's not like one dominant object in that orbit. There's a bunch of smaller ones that all orbit in that region. That's kind of what Pluto is. So Pluto is one of a swarm of smaller objects out past Neptune. It's called the Kuiper belt, actually. And so because we now realize that Pluto is a sort of a different thing than a normal planet like a Jupiter, we put that adjective dwarf in front of it.
Okay, is there a time where all of the planets kind of line up?
I don't know.
I see it in pictures.
Right. Yes, that is one problem. The textbooks, they don't scale it. It's almost never that way. I mean, you can imagine it's a little harder to make a really accurate drawing in a textbook, like, for K-12 or something like that. But yeah, I guess maybe once in a billion years they'll line up perfectly. It's not very often.
Yeah, and I guess if they did, the sun would kind of go blocked, and it would. I'm thinking it'd be a splatter. I may be wrong here, but I always wondered. But do any of the others get in front of the sun and cause, why don't we hear about that?
Occasionally you may hear about, again, one of these transits. So about every couple of decades, Mercury or Venus will go in front of the sun. Its orbit will be lined up with ours, and it'll go in front. We call that a transit. And that's really a neat thing. Of course, because they're so much smaller, and it doesn't really affect the amount of light you see, most people don't recognize that it's happening. Only if you're sort of paying attention to the news or have an astronomer that a friend of yours, then you can go out and see it. But yeah, no, eclipses, occultations, transits, those happen quite frequently.
Who's the best known astronomer in our world? The one that all of the scientists revere?
That's a great question. I would say probably the best known astronomer right now is Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's just out in the public eye a lot. If CNN, if there's an astronomy story, he's the guy they'll call to see if he'll come and talk about things. He had that television show Cosmos recently. That was a sort of a remake of the old show from Carl Sagan back in the 70s, I think it was. So he's probably the most famous right now.
But Galileo and some of these...
Those are the giants. Galileo, Copernicus, those are the guys that, even Newton. Newton did a lot for astronomy. You hear about him more in terms of physics, but he did quite a bit for astronomy as well.
We got just a couple of minutes with Dr. Crews, and before we leave here, I want to give you an opportunity to let people know what the STEM building is, the Latimer and Smith STEM building, and what is in that building that is going to be useful to students?
It's an amazing place. So those of you that have been around UT Martin for a while probably have heard the term EPS, Engineering and Physical Science, or the students often called it Eternal Pain and Suffering for all the hard classes I had to take. So that building was something like 50 or 60 years old. It was one of the oldest classroom buildings on campus.
I went to school in there. Yeah.
So, it was a great place too, but it was getting old. So now that we have this new building, we have all of the sciences in there, engineering, chemistry, well, except for biology, of course. Mm-hmm. They have their own building. Physics, astronomy, all of it's there. And we have updated laboratories, classroom spaces, office spaces. And one of the things that's exciting to me is I have an observatory there now. So it's still being put together. So it's not open yet. But once I do get it open, hopefully in the next month or so, I'm going to start having public events. Mm-hmm. So one thing's, maybe I'll try to keep you in touch with you, Paul, and I'll make some announcements about when we're having public nights or anything like that.
Be fine, yeah. Got just a couple of minutes here before we leave. We're talking about the eclipse. It's taking place this Monday afternoon at approximately 1 p.m. Central Time for those of you listening here on our podcast. The one thing you want to make sure people know, what is that?
There's this sort of idea that the sun is more dangerous during an eclipse. It's not. In fact, it's slightly less because it's darker. The important thing is normally when you look at the sun, you immediately look away. It's bright. It kind of hurts your eyes. You look away. During an eclipse, because there's this fascinating thing happening, you have this tendency to stare at it. And that's the problem. Don't stare at the sun. Don't feel like you have to stay inside or not look at the sun at all because it's more dangerous. Just don't stare at it. Or if you want to stare at it so that you can see the eclipse, get some of those glasses that'll protect your eyes. So you can get those. I think Discovery Park has them in their store, or they're giving them away. There's lots of places around here that are giving them away. You can order them on Amazon. So get a pair of those glasses. Put them on whenever you want to look at the sun. Of course, during the eclipse itself, take it off, because if you have your glasses on during totality, then you won't see the eclipse because it'll be blocking that out. So get those glasses so you can look at the sun. And, if you are going to be in the path of totality, make sure you know exactly when it's starting and when it's finishing. You can take them off and look at it.
And they'll be good for 21 more years coming up when the next eclipse. Is that right?
I would be cautious about that. A lot of people have asked me about glasses from the 2017 eclipse. The main thing is, you have these glasses. They're not something you're using all the time. You'll put them in a drawer, and they might get scratched. So I would highly recommend, taking a good look at those glasses, make sure there's no scratches, no defects. You might want to do a quick test, put them on and sort of really quickly glance at the sun and see how it's doing. If it doesn't look like it's blocking out the sun very well right now, I wouldn't use them and get a new pair.
Okay, you've told us that Paducah area around here is probably going to be the best. You told me that you're going to go a little bit further north and to the west. Is that right?
Yes, sir, in Sykeston.
All right, I didn't want to push it out there too far, but you have your own spot, and if you're planning to go and don't have a spot, you may have a hard time finding a place to pull over on the side of the road.
Exactly. I mean, Paducah and Evansville, these places that are on the other side of the river, right? So that's one of the difficulties is we have these big rivers in the area that sort of block our access to where most of the eclipse is going to be. So the bridges, that might be the sort of choke point where all the traffic goes. But even so, because Paducah and Evansville will be the easiest accessible places for people in the southeast, it could get busy. So
hope you've enjoyed our program today with Dr. Lionel Crews. He is Associate Professor of Physics at the University of Tennessee at Martin. He's been there for the last 23 years. He knows his stuff. That's why we brought him on today, so that you folks can be able to enjoy knowing what you need to know about the eclipse, which is going to be tomorrow, Monday afternoon at about 1 p.m. And remember to wear those glasses. Thanks so much for coming in, Dr. Crews. You've been great today. You've helped us all to understand what an eclipse is and what we need to do and what we don't have to worry about. And I appreciate that so much.
My pleasure.
That's our program today. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this week's 30 Minutes. I'm Paul Tinkle, pre-recorded.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.